And hello to you. Good morning if you're joining us from the West Coast. Good afternoon if you're joining us from the East Coast. Or if you're closer than I am right now, Europe, Africa. Good evening, I would say. First of all, very happy to see you here in this webinar, which promises to be a bang. Just let's give the people who are not as punctual as you maybe 1 or 2 minutes so they can join, and then we will start rolling. But also, I want to extend a very huge thank you to everybody who is now in the webinar. We appreciate your punctuality, and we hope that you are going to have a very nice 59 minutes together. All right, the counter is going up, which is always a good sign. So hello, if you joined us a bit late, I am Victor, and I am just going to do a short intro on behalf of Solarplaza, and I can promise you from now that I'm going to be the least interesting person you are going to see here in this webinar. Looking very much forward to meeting all our speakers who have prepared some wonderful presentations for you, and of course, who are very eager to answer your questions. All right, I feel like the number of participants joining has quite stabilized a bit. So once again, for the third and final time, hello, welcome all. Thank you everybody for joining this awesome webinar. We've been very excited for quite a few days now, expecting this webinar to happen. So yeah, let's get it going. First of all, as I said, I speak to you on behalf of Solarplaza. We are a Rotterdam-based agency dedicated to high-level business events focused on renewables. We are established since 2004, and this spring we actually fulfilled a huge milestone for us, and by organizing our 250th event. We organized events in 51 countries so far, and we do have a network that exceeds 60,000 solar PV and renewables professionals. If you're really curious about who we are and want to know more, in case you don't already, please go to our website, which has recently gone through a transformation. So you can actually find a knowledge and network platform, not just a website. It's more, it's better, and it's all for you. So yeah, please join. Also, this webinar is part of our promotion campaign for next year's Solarplaza Summit Asset Management North America. I hope that many of you have seen past editions of this summit. It's one of our flagship events, and we're very proud to organize it year after year. We are now selling tickets in the early bird stage, which means that you can actually get a discounted ticket if you hurry, and if you want to log in and see the details of the tickets, just you know what to do with the QR code. We're going to have the QR code once more at the end of the webinar. Now, this is where we are in the webinar intro. I promised not to keep you long, so my time is up, and I am going to slowly but surely introduce Tori, David, and Mike. They are our speakers for today, and yeah, we're expecting quite a lot of interesting information from them. But also, as I said, we made them promise that they would answer all your questions, or as many as we have time for. So in case you do want to pose questions, you have a question box in the upper right corner. So yeah, please go there and ask your questions, and then we will forward them to the speakers. And in case you do have technical issues, just use the chat box, which is the other chat icon on the top right of your screen. And that's all for me. Moving on, I would like to warmly welcome on the virtual stage Tori, who is going to take it forward. So let's have a nice digital round of applause. Tori, here you go.
Thank you for the introduction, Victor. And let's just set the stage here for our discussion today. We're going to have two key themes you're going to hear again and again. And the first is that the quality of a project's construction really depends on the people in the field doing the work, building it. And that asset's long-term financial performance depends on their workmanship. And I'd go as far to say that it could be the most important driver of the asset's long-term financial performance. So now let's just walk through what to expect. In the first part of the webinar, I'm going to walk you through field data collected by HelioVolta that informs those two themes. And I'll also cover our data collection methodology. Then I'm going to turn it over to David Penalva, the CEO and co-founder of HelioVolta and SolarGrade, and Mike Capalbo, the VP of EPC at Greenskies. And Mike and David are going to hash out kind of key findings from field inspections in a discussion format and explore what they mean for service provider selection. So as Victor mentioned, please feel free to ask questions at any time, and we'll cover them in the final 15 minutes of today's webinar. All right, so first, some quick introductions. HelioVolta and SolarGrade are two sister companies that were co-founded by David Penalva. HelioVolta provides technical services, especially field inspections to asset owners and EPCs. And every inspection that's conducted by HelioVolta's field engineers uses SolarGrade. It's a field operations software platform. So when we talk about the impact of service provider selection on your financial returns, that discussion is framed by data that's gathered in the field by HelioVolta using SolarGrade. And that app, SolarGrade, structures all of those field findings into a database that informs objective quality rankings. And now, Mike, I'll turn it over to you for Greenskies.
Thanks, Tori. Appreciate the opportunity. So for anybody who's unfamiliar with our firm, Greenskies, we're a national renewable energy developer / IPP. We are a leader in the commercial industrial scale development space for renewable energy, headquartered in North Haven, Connecticut, but we do have staff and active projects spread throughout the United States, as well as operating assets. Today, just a little bit more about the company. We've completed hundreds of projects, different market sectors, C&I customers, corporations, municipality and mush market space, real estate partners, community solar gardens, et cetera. And that all adds up to millions of kilowatt hours of clean energy every year. And I'm excited to join this particular presentation because we really have a serious commitment to quality, safety, and long-term partnerships. Our relationship with HelioVolta has really grown, and they've been a great partner. And the other thing to note about Greenskies is we're in this for the long run. We're with our clients through every step from the first conversation to ongoing operations. We are invested. And I think I'll kick it back to you, Tori, at this point.
Thanks, Mike. Really impressive what y'all have built at Greenskies. All right, so now let's dig a little bit into the data set. So when I'm talking about field inspection data, where is it coming from? What is it? So here, what you see is over 1,000 projects in the US and Puerto Rico that were inspected by HelioVolta. That's all those pins on the map. We identified 70 EPCs and nearly 120 subcontractors who were building these projects. It's a really diverse group in terms of both experience and size, which is what you see in that chart on the right. The range spans from over 2 to over 10,000 employees, and again, from 2 to over 100 years of operations for these organizations. The inspections that HelioVolta conducted took place over the past 4 years, and they fall into 2 main project categories: new construction and operating assets. Now, this timeline is going to show, you kind of all the different types of inspections that HelioVolta conducts. Sorry, these slides are not cooperating. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so new construction inspections include key milestones like golden row and mechanical completion, as well as ongoing QA/QC and commissioning. And then for operating assets, we looked at health audits, technical due diligence for project acquisitions, and end of EPC warranty inspections. While HelioVolta also does failure root cause analysis, that data wasn't included in this data set. The next thing I want to give you some context for is the different parties or service providers that might be involved in all of these projects, as that's really our focus today. So for our analysis, we defined the EPC as the entity overseeing engineering, procurement, and construction. Subcontractors are hired by EPCs to perform the work in the field, but these relationships, they're all very nuanced. So, you know, the EPC's roles and the number of subcontractors employed can vary significantly by project. For a large scale asset, you might see a different subcontractor for mechanical, electrical, and civil work, and that subcontractor might hire their own second tier subcontractor for certain aspects of the build too. In contrast, there are projects that are built entirely in-house by one EPC that's, you know, working independently with its own crews. And then several of the EPCs that were included in this analysis are also developing and owning the projects they built, like Greenskies. But our take really is that the buck stops with the EPC when it comes to construction quality. That is the entity that's taking ownership of the build, even if they're hiring out some of the work. All right. So while there are nuances to inspection types and parties that are covered in our data set, there's a very high degree of standardization in the data that's collected in that documentation. So anytime a HelioVolta field engineer goes out and finds an issue or a nonconformity, it gets rated by risk severity, from negligible up to critical. And that rating correlates directly to downtime and truck rolls, and thus the financial performance of that asset. So critical issues, these are problems or nonconformities when the risk of a safety event is so high that partial or total system de-energization is required before HelioVolta's field engineer even leaves the site. It needs remediation immediately. Major issues also require urgent corrective action and may cause downtime, but it's not a same-day situation. Minor and negligible issues don't require immediate action, but they also shouldn't be totally ignored. So the images on the left are gonna show how the same general issue, improperly torqued connectors, can appear at different risk severities. When it's negligible or minor, it's isolated to just 1 or 2 instances. We don't see any thermal anomalies. In other words, nothing is hot, nothing is failing, no signs of accelerated degradation. When the issue is major, we're seeing multiple instances of improper torquing at a site, and it's often in combination with other problem signs like accelerated degradation or a malfunctioning component. So in this case, that under-torqued connector is intermated with a different connector brand. It's a field-made home run, and it's also not the only instance on this site. When it's critical, that furthest image on the right, it's already failed catastrophically and melting. We're already seeing a failure that requires immediate action. So to ensure consistency, our field engineers apply a scoring rubric to assign risk severity in the field, And again, every issue gets tagged in the SolarGrade mobile app in the exact same way. So this consistency in data collection means we could push that framework of risk severity to another level and establish what we call a HelioVolta quality standard, or HQS rating. So that standard is mapping right back to the number and the severity of issues per megawatt of installed DC capacity inspected by HelioVolta. Basically, we took each individual project that our team inspected and gave it a score of above HQS, meets HQS, below, or failing, according to the number of issues and how severe they are. So for a project to really be above the standard, we want to see no critical issues and no major issues, less than 10 combined minor and negligible issues per megawatt DC. To just meet the standard, to meet that kind of raw quality benchmark, still no critical issues, less than 2.5 major issues per megawatt DC, and less than 50 combined minor and negligible issues per megawatt DC. We took that project level rating and then applied it to EPCs by averaging their number of issues per megawatt DC by severity in every project inspected by HelioVolta that they built. And we only rated EPCs where we had inspected at least 2 of their projects. Here's what we found. So not a single EPC achieved that above HQS rating, but I'll flag that 10% of individual projects did. 33% of EPCs passed, and then 67 were below the standard. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to go to the next slide here. All right, thank you. But what does this really mean? When a project is rated above or meets HQS, it has a low rate of issues overall. So unexpected, unplanned truck rolls are unlikely in normal conditions. Asset owners can expect the system is going to operate appropriately, properly, as long as it's well maintained. And it's a good bet that your financial returns will stay on track. But if it's rated below or failing, you're virtually guaranteed to pay for unexpected truck rolls, even in normal conditions. That means downtime too. The high overall volume of issues means that PV system is going to generate less power than it ought. So if you think back to those improperly torqued connectors, even if they're not melting, they're still operating less efficiently. And all of those resistive losses are going to add up to lower profits. And that's why choosing a quality EPC is the best guarantee of your project's long-term financial performance. The further a project falls in this quality rating, the more likely it is to have high O&M costs, unexpected, unplanned, unbudgeted truck rolls, and reduced energy yield. So when an asset has poor construction quality, your O&M provider is starting several steps back behind the starting gate when they take over. So let's dig into one final observation from our data set that might seem a little counterintuitive. Inspections of operating assets reveal construction quality. And that's because construction defects are frequently not corrected before a project gets handed off to the O&M team. And so on that table on the left, we're comparing expected O&M costs for a 1 megawatt project that meets the quality standard versus one that doesn't. They're almost twice as high for the lower quality projects. And if we look to the right, we can see how high rates of minor and negligible issues ultimately impact O&M costs too. So those issues can become more severe over time and ultimately require corrective action, even if it's not necessary right away. So the EPC you choose is going to impact your profits, not only in year 1, but as the system ages and the full impact of those lower risk construction defects are realized. So now let's take a breath. Let's get some feedback. Mike, does this reflect your experience?
Yeah, it does. And I lead the EPC department, right? But I interact with our asset management and O&M departments pretty regularly, whether it's standing meetings or just one-offs, and I hear and I see the financial impact of the problems. Sometimes unavoidable, but like you mentioned, a lot of times it could have been identified a lot earlier, specifically in the EPC phase. And we also talk about how downtime and lower generation can impact our partners as well, like the financing partners that we have. Their goals are going to tie to annual and even monthly production as well. So basically, all the parties downstream of the installation phase are similarly motivated, which is why it's very important for us to catch this during the EPC phase.
That makes sense to me, and definitely appreciate that perspective. I'm not sure all EPCs have it though. Like if you're washing your hands of a project as soon as your workmanship warranty expires, do you have that visibility, and are you as invested?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So we're a long-term asset owner, so we're invested right up front. But you're right, not every company is. Whether that's good or bad is for others to decide. Something I want to keep in mind here, just a note for anybody who's attending this that's kind of new to the concept of renewable energy. It's still a relatively new subsect of the U.S. construction industry overall, if you think about it. Contracting firms have been around forever, but solar has really boomed over the last 20 years. What's happened is a lot of contracting firms have entered this space within that last 20 years. And so you have parties entering that don't have the experience necessary. And so when we talk about what's deemed of sufficient quality, it's really been a moving target. So because of lessons learned at IPPs like ourselves, and because of the efforts that HelioVolta and parties like that are putting into this, we're at a point now where we know, I mean, for the most part, we know what the level of installation quality that's required to avoid such problems in the operating phase, to the point where the assets are operating to the level that we projected in the modeling. And then this trickles down to the installing partners. We have a responsibility to coach our installing partners, not just what's good versus poor quality, what that looks like, but it's important to explain the why behind it. So this discussion we're having about, okay, what we do here affects the next 20, 30, 40 years. It's really important for them to understand that so that they get invested as well.
That is a great point, Mike. Thank you. So when you work inside the industry, it's easy to forget how quickly things have ramped, and that, it's our obligation to address a learning curve. And so with that, I think I'll kick it over to you, David, to dig into HelioVolta's findings more.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tori. Thank you for walking us through the data and kind of the criteria that we have as a company to measure quality. We're gonna be talking, Mike and I are gonna be talking about some of the key findings in these results, and we're gonna have like a conversation on some of these slides. I will encourage anyone in the audience to submit questions as we go through the slides. We'll try to get back to the questions as we wrap up the key findings here. We're gonna start with the first slide here, which is one of the most interesting findings is the wide variability on EPC quality. And what we're looking at here in the chart is on the y-axis, we have the issues per megawatt, which is one of the kind of quality KPIs. And we're plotting that against all these different 70 different EPCs. And we also have the different colors in the bars as the type of quality issues, whether they're minor, negligible, major, or critical. And what you can see, the first thing that stands out in this chart is the level of, okay, here you go, we lost the slides. The level of variety between EPCs. We're looking at the worst performing EPC at 400 issues per megawatt to the lowest one around 0.4. This is almost 2 orders of magnitude or 20 times worse quality from the top best performer to the worst performer, performer, with an average of 20 issues per megawatt for the whole data set. And first question would be, Mike, are you surprised by this wide range in quality?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. In my experience of doing this, even if you think about it, even if you have a contractor that's really big and maybe they have 10 years of experience installing solar projects, you have to remember the level of experience within each crew really matters. They may have 20 different crews, and the skill and knowledge of the laborers, electricians, and foremen is pretty wide. And we don't necessarily know from a developer's perspective, when we're hiring a contractor, how many other projects are they installing for other developers? Are they getting pulled in multiple directions, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, understaffing, delays, training, that can all be an issue. Just one other point, David. So the other key here is quality assurance from our perspective. If you're an asset owner or whatever, it takes a serious dedicated effort. I mean, we can't just, companies like Greenskies, we can't just hand installers a set of plans and say go build it and expect to get the level of quality. It really takes somebody on our team or a HelioVolta to check their work and make sure you're not going to have long-standing issues.
Yeah. The other point that I thought it was interesting out of the findings is that half of the EPCs actually met the quality standards in terms of the number of issues per megawatt for minor and negligible issues. But most of them got pushed into below the quality standards due to the high level of major and critical. And just to go back to the explanation, I think Tori went over this, but just to reinforce what we mean, that a EPC that meets the quality standards is having 0 critical issues, less than 2.5 issues per megawatt that are major, and less than 50 issues that are minor or negligible. And what we see is that they tend to go into the below or fail criteria due to having a high concentration of major and critical. Do you think, Mike, like, why is that? Is there a lack of standardization with regards to the type of quality issue that we're facing in the day-to-day basis? Why do you think is that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It is tough. I mean, you would think inherently that the installers just know to avoid the critical and major issues. I mean, frankly, I think a lot of this is conflicts of interest. What are the priorities? If you think about it, installing contractor, 99% of the time, they're not directly invested in the ongoing asset performance or the safety of the site. I mean, of course, they have warranties and reputations to uphold, but their primary goals, and this is not meant to be a criticism, but their primary goal is to finish the installation on time, which you want to do. But it's up to companies like ours or IPPs to step back and say, wait a minute. Quality is equally weighted here against the schedule because we're the ones that have to live with the problems. I think it comes down to a couple things. Education, right? What is serious and what's not serious? I think that's really important to explain to the installers and even to other developers. And then 2, you really have to have a concerted effort to avoid them, to train people on how to avoid them. And if that doesn't work, then we have to make sure we catch them.
Yeah, thank you. And for the audience, if you're interested in looking into the details on how our company goes about the ratings and the specific decision-making process, we publish this open source, our full process in our last PV Health report from last year. So if you're interested into kind of learning more about it, but we can move to the next slide. This is another interesting finding. Yeah, so we're looking now at, this is the same EPC, a chart with almost 100 different projects built by the same, general contractor EPC with several subcontractors underneath. But what it stands out of this chart is that how can we have such a diverse quality when the whole portfolio is managed by the same company? And this goes from, again, I think the top, the number 1 has over 100 issues per megawatt, and the lowest or the best quality project has under 10. So again, a question for you, Mike, is how do you, what do you think that variability happens even within the same EPC?
Yeah, so I think the root cause here, well, first of all, I agree. agree with the data that's evidence, right? But some projects are great and hitting the mark, but definitely not all of them are there in terms of quality. If you get good results from one crew, it doesn't mean you're getting good results from another crew in a different region. Even as an EPC, if we hire one contractor, if you will, they may have different people. This is going to be a consistent theme in this. But so it's really important to, if you want to understand this deeply, is to understand how the contracting firms operate. So for instance, are they growing and they have a lot of new staff? Did they sign up for too many projects at once? Did a key project manager, team leader recently leave, right? So you never quite know what the factors are, but no, this data doesn't surprise me. We see it at our company. And I think it's all about setting expectations. And I will just say, I think everybody needs to understand improving your installation quality takes time. David, I think you're going to touch on that later. It could take years, frankly. But the other thing it really takes is data. So if you want to quantify success or failure and really drive behaviors, you got to be persistent, you got to train, you got to share the results. And so we'll get into best practices more, but advice I would give is a substandard approach to giving contractors feedback is your quality is bad. It's vague. They don't really know what you mean. A better approach is to use this data we get from HelioVolta or whatever platform you're using to track issues, is to go to that firm and say, hey, we found X issues per megawatt across your 10 most recent projects, which is in the whatever 32nd percentile of your competitors, other installers we use. Now they know, okay, we can measure this and we know where we stand against everybody else. So that would be my initial reaction.
So Mike, what do you think is the effect on quality and project quality? So when you look at people versus process, what do you think has a higher impact?
I think it's mostly process, because if we think about people, I mean, pretty much anybody that's working on these, or the vast majority, let's say, are capable people. So the process has to be in place to train them and really make sure they understand what sufficient installation quality looks like, and then having a third party or just somebody uninvolved with the project actually double check. So I would argue it's more process than it is people. Of course, there are exceptions to that.
Okay. Moving to the next slide, the next finding, we basically were looking at the data and we were trying to, understand, is there any correlation? Is the correlation of the data with regards to higher quality when it comes from, understanding kind of the company behind, the EPC behind it. So what we did here is we plotted, the number of years in operation for the company in the y-axis. So it goes from 0 to over 150 years. And again, these companies don't just do solar; they might be in a bunch of other industries. And we plotted on the x-axis in how many states this company was present, and then the bubble size represents how large the company is, going all the way from over 10,000 employees to less than 10. And what we see here is the color of the bubble means if they fail quality standards, if they are below the HelioVolta quality standards, or they meet the quality standards. And we couldn't really get any correlation. It seems to be all over the place. It doesn't really matter. There are sometimes companies that are small that have very good quality. There's sometimes large companies that have good quality, even though in this plot doesn't really represent the larger companies here, clearly, on the red side. But basically, we couldn't really make any sense of that. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on does it matter? Is the company history, presence in different states, company size, something that you kind of look, you have it as a criteria for quality when you're selecting your, contractors?
Yeah, I mean, it's not terribly surprising, although I would hope that the larger, more experienced solar contractors cause less issues, if you will. But yeah, it kind of goes back to the people and process. If I think back to how I answered your question lastly, I actually think both are extremely important. So you have to have people who know the right process, right? and especially at large companies. I mean, you have so many different, you have myriad levels of skill and knowledge. And as you and Tori found, that it's not always, there is really no correlation, at least in the data we have right now. So whether it's, personnel changes, again, priorities, are they what is their main driver at that point in time? What is leadership saying is most important? Is it budget? Is it timeline? Are they discussing quality? So it's hard to predict without, knowing the details of these EPCs, but I think all those things, all those competing priorities kind of push and pull.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move to the next finding. In this one, we did find a really great correlation here, which is there's a correlation between quality and project size. So what we're looking at in this slide is three different whisker plots that represent kind of the average and standard deviations and then kind of outliers for projects that are 0 to 5 megawatts, 5 to 20, and over 20. And what we see with regards to the average average issues per megawatts, or the quality metrics, is that for projects that are under 5 megawatts, the average number of issues per megawatts is around 109, let's call it. And when we jump into the next segment, the 5 to 20, it drops all the way to almost 8. But if you jump to the next segment for over 20 megawatts, and again, we're trying to kind of basically distinguish between commercial, CNI, CNI and segment, DG, kind of a smaller utility scale, and kind of large utility scale projects. And there is a clear correlation, average issues per megawatt going from 100 to 8 to 0.5, almost orders of magnitude when you go in each step. And again, here, one of the interesting highlights is that 50% of the projects under 5 megawatts still met the quality standards. But the question here is that, well, we see a decrease, and I have some logic on why, but I would like to hear first your kind of logic on what do you think this could be? I'll kind of add my 2 cents to that.
Yeah, who doesn't love whisker plots, right? I would say this makes some intuitive sense, right? I mean, regardless of where you are, the smaller projects are going to get less attention. It's just the nature of it. They're less financially impactful to the business. They, even from a contractor perspective, they may think we can throw a more mediocre crew at that small project because it's just going to be easier to build. So this does make sense. The other thing is, in my exposure to utility scale projects, you've got a big budget, right? So the developer, let's call it a Greenskies, there's more money in the pot, so you can actually afford to have people on site every day in different roles. You may even have multiple people that are there every day that are full-time staff dedicated to quality control. So they're catching things early, and all the lessons you learn on that first subarray you build, you just apply them to the rest of the build. So this makes sense. But David, actually, I had a question for you about this. So especially for the larger sites, how does your team view sampling in terms of inspections? It's a big site, and it wouldn't make schedule or financial sense for you to inspect every nut and bolt across the whole site.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and something that has been brought up a few times. We take a sampling approach, ISO 2859, for looking at largest projects. Obviously, there is less time with regards to how deep you can go into inspecting a 300 megawatt project versus a 1 megawatt rooftop. However, we try to concentrate on making sure that we're touching a significantly representative amount of components in each of these sections and checklists that we have. So yes, there's probably a little effect on the sampling affecting the lower ratio of issues per megawatt. But as you're saying, the key difference here that, in my opinion, really makes the quality better is that a lot of the larger projects have a quality assurance team on site 24/7, and also solar is very copy-paste type of block. So if you really put a lot of effort and you get it right the first time, is most likely you're gonna get a lot of the patterns and process and procedures as you go through quality for for a lot of the largest sites. So not surprised. I mean, it makes sense. These sites, again, are the largest sites are very large on having that level of issues per megawatt. That will be a very clear, fiasco with regards to the financials for these sites, and therefore they can afford having measures to mitigate those.
Yeah, David, I would argue this highlights that we really need to pay attention to quality in doing these inspections on projects smaller than 20 megawatts, because they just don't get the organic attention they would if they were bigger.
Yeah, makes sense. We're gonna move to the next slide here. Yeah, so okay, on this slide, the interesting findings for this slide is that we are looking at 20 different EPCs. So you have on the x-axis the different 20 EPCs that we had data for several consecutive years. So we're looking at least a couple of years. We were, kind of wanted to see when these EPCs are overseen, oversight by a third-party independent, quality assurance and quality control. Are they getting better or are they getting worse? On basically the column, the blue column is year prior to 2024. Column in yellow is the year over 2024 and beyond that. And what we see is that 50%, there's a 50% decrease in issues per megawatt overall for the data set, and EPCs, now that we're not passing, we have 0 EPCs passing the HelioVolta quality standards in 2022. Now we've seen 40% of the EPCs now passed. There's a very clear trend here that you see improvement in a lot of them. And yeah, this is kind of what this chart represents. Mike, any thoughts on this chart?
Yeah, I have. I'll try not to be too long-winded. I do have a lot of thoughts on this chart. So from a developer IPP perspective, when HelioVolta, first of all, this makes a lot of sense. It's being proven with all the data. But when we hire a HelioVolta, we see exactly what issues exist, right, with photos and a report and everything. And even if you have in-house quality staff, which I recommend everybody does, you may not catch everything. Sometimes their priorities change, or they're wearing different hats on site. So if you're going to use a third party, and the other piece, I'm sorry, if you're thinking about using a third party like HelioVolta, and you're not going to use them on every project, I do recommend randomizing which sites. Don't tell the installer ahead of time necessarily which sites will be inspected, because otherwise they're probably just going to focus the quality attention on the sites they know are going to be inspected. So keep that a little mysterious, I guess I would say. But it goes back to the theme: if the standards are clear and folks are held accountable to those standards, then this will likely improve over time. Once they're really aware of, now I understand what the benchmark is. The next time they build a project for you, it really should get better, or else you have a serious problem. And you want to make sure everything is clearly identified and named, right, in the punch items. A lot harder for a crew to know what to fix if they don't have exact information on what do I have to fix and where do I have to fix it. And I'm going to go again, as an asset owner, if you just want to use a scapegoat, you could always go back to the installer and say, hey, this isn't us telling you what has to happen. This is a required third party. It's a list of things that a third party says have to be done. Otherwise, you can't move to the next milestone, whether it's for bank purposes, customer purposes, whatever. Have that in your back pocket. David, I did have, and I'm not sure how much you can share, but out of curiosity, do you know what happened there?
Yeah, so there are 3 outliers here. 2 of them expanded their teams significantly. So there's a lot of expansion happening within these 2 years specifically. And one of them had a kind of company ownership change that really led to their quality control getting off the rails, and that's something that we've seen, and we were trying to kind of find explanations to some of these. But again, that's the minority. Most of them kind of got better over time, which is what we would expect. And we can move to the next slide. I'll try to be quick on this one. So on next slide, we are looking at a case study. So what we did here is that we are looking at a EPC 40, one of the EPCs that we've been working with. We inspected a lot of projects for this company or another company, but overseeing this EPC. In this case, we saw that the EPC 40 started in 2022 having 2 subcontractors, and in 2023 they were expanding, building more sites, kind of developing more sites, and they moved to having 5 qualified subcontractors to 2024, where they had more than 20. That's a significant operation kind of growth within those 3 years. However, working with this company, this EPC, we were able to kind of track the subs and see how their quality got much better when they had oversight. And I think it goes back to your point, Mike, where if there's a feedback loop where you have data and you can provide that data back to the subcontractors, it's not that they're willing to do things wrong. They are actually want to improve. You just they never had the opportunity to kind of close the gap. I think it was very surprising, like, to see drops of over 60%. That is a crazy improvement on it confirms a lot of the value that we have as a company, not only for the EPC but the subs and kind of the overall industry. And just any comments or thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is what's pretty exciting to me. I mean, what it shows is it shows a couple things. It's going to take a cycle. It's going to take, you get through this round of projects with an installer or an EPC, and you're going to learn where the gaps are, right? And then you find the gaps, you address those gaps, you set the expectation the next time, and it gets better. And the key here is once they know what to do, once they know what's important, most people, like you said, are willing to grow, are willing to learn, are willing to change their habits to be looked at as a premier installer from a quality perspective. And I will admit, it is a challenge. It's a challenge for developers to find good long-term partners. Who we hire depends on regionality and availability and price and a lot of other factors, and you just have to make sure quality is a key component. We've already seen the financial impact of previous slides if you don't do that. And I would also say expansion, it can be a risk, right? If you're a company that's growing, you have to have real dedicated plans to define and enforce those quality standards. The other thing that matters too is who's actually inspecting, right? You're going to get somewhat varied results because you're going to have multiple inspectors, but this is the trend that I want to see, that all of us should really want to see.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Moving to the next slide, I think you have that one. If you want to.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, next slide, please. Here we go. So just to touch on this one quickly, these are some VAR recommended best practices for any time you're selecting a service provider. Few key things here. Make sure that your contractor agreements, your subcontractor agreements, your EPC agreements address quality meaningfully, be specific, tie any kind of quality, call it punch list correction or whatever it is, financially motivate the installers to succeed on the first try, not the third try, on the first try, whether it's payment milestones or whatever, potentially even give them a bonus if they have a super clean site, because it saves everybody time. It's actually good. And then set the tone prior to mobilization. So sit down with your installers, your EPCs. For companies like ours, we have to bring the data. We have to bring this information that HelioVolta provides, give them examples of good and bad installation quality. Warn them that any issues that Greenskies finds, that HelioVolta finds, has to be corrected before they can take the next step in terms of achieving the related milestone on the project. So get ahead of it. Be honest with them and upfront, and you may change their perspective, and you definitely can go back to that conversation later if they mess up and say, well, we had this conversation. And continue to collect data and share it with them, right? Again, most of these people want to grow and learn. And if you have to, set up some on-site training. A lot of them are open to that. And the final point here, especially if you don't have a robust in-house quality program with people who are physically visiting the site frequently, hire a third party like HelioVolta. I touched on this point before. We at Greenskies, we do have quality assurance technicians, but they may be there to do certain specific things. right? That for that particular day are not quality centric, right? It's how are we progressing, or there's a problem or whatever. So when you bring in a firm like HelioVolta, they're specialized, right? They're the experts. They do this day in and day out. And if nothing else, it's a great backstop in case we miss things. We can go to the next slide. Okay. From my personal perspective, here's why quality matters. I think there are really three overarching reasons to focus on quality that any asset owner, EPC should really think about. Okay. Number one, you don't want the PR nightmare when something goes wrong, right? There are very few companies that budget time and money for damage control. It's unplanned. It hurts your firm's reputation. It disrupts your operations. It also damages the industry at large. When we have failures in the news about a fire on a roof or something, you know, nobody wants that. It's something you don't need. So please focus on this, and you know, let's all improve. Number two, it financially impacts the bottom line, right? When you maintain the quality standards, you don't get bogged down on the rework, the truck rolls, the asset underperformance, spending time explaining the issues to your CEO or whatever it is. It just disrupts things, and it impacts you financially. Number three, and I probably feel the strongest about this one, is it's the right thing to do, right? Take pride in your work, leave things better than you found them. I abide by the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. So it applies to asset quality, integrity, just like it applies to whatever you do in everyday life. So that's what I would say there. You know, again, when you have real data and you clearly communicate from the top down of all the people that need to be involved to understand these things, that's when you really see the success. And another thing is, I mean, think about the ancillary benefit of this. If you're giving the installer or you're giving the EPC all this data, what they may realize is, oh, crew A is really struggling and crew B is really shining. Maybe we have a training issue, maybe we have a personnel issue. So it just keeps going down the chain. The more people learn, the more they're going to find out where their problems are and to fix it. And last point on this slide, you know, since we started this partnership with HelioVolta, they began inspecting our sites back in 2022. We have seen improvement from a lot of our installing partners. On the flip side, we also know which installers are not catching on, and you know, it's a serious data point for us when we think about who are we going to move forward with as a trusted partner in the next whatever 1, 2, 3 years. If you're an installer, you know, you don't want to get that kind of reputation, because even though the industry has grown a lot, it's still a small world. Word gets around from developer and IPP to another. And you know, people share notes on who's good and reliable and who's not. So it's definitely worth taking note.
Well, thank you, Mike. Yeah. I think we're moving into questions. We have, if you guys are interested, the audience interested in downloading the more. I mean, we didn't cover the whole content on our PV Health Report 2025, so feel free to download the document. And also, you know, SolarGrade platform helps you to do the data collection, data structure that you need to be able to kind of produce and get these insights that we were presenting today. So I'll open up for questions on our next slide.
Great. Thanks so much, David and Mike. That was a great discussion. And thanks also to everyone who's asked questions. If we don't get to them in the next few minutes, we will follow up with you after the webinar. But first, I think I'd direct this to you first, Mike, is do you have any advice for EPCs on counteracting cognitive tunneling? And if you aren't familiar with that term, it means when someone is busy with a repetitive task, say terminating DC connectors, their brain goes into auto mode, they're performing the action without focusing on what they're doing. And this is a cause of, you know, problems with wire terminations and string failures and fires, according to the asker.
Yeah, I see this a lot, actually. And you can have a laborer or somebody doing the same task and they're just staring at the same thing. You know, you often don't catch the mistakes when you're staring at something for very long. And you may have a foreman on site or somebody, a project manager, who's experiencing the same thing, doesn't catch it. That's why I think it's really important to bring somebody in it could even be at your same EPC firm. It could be a third party. Bring somebody in along the way. Especially if it's a big site, you want to monitor what's happening and checking the quality and correct it early. So the last resort is to catch it all at the end and have everybody fix it. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think pausing and asking ourselves, are we doing this right? While the crews are mobilized and can more easily fix things is important.
Thank you. David, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think Mike answered that question very well.
All right, then I'll take you to the next one, which is when we're looking at those EPCs and ranking them against that HelioVolta quality standard, were there factors besides kind of workmanship that contributed to lower quality ratings? For example, things like tracker outages or serial defects.
Yeah,
and here I'd remind folks,
in some cases,
like failure root cause.
Yeah, in some cases there is. Again, I always like to give this example because sometimes when we publish data around inverter issues that we call inverter issues, the readers think that we're talking about the inverter itself, and these might not be the inverter. This might be workmanship associated to the inverter, but there is definitely a factor where if the component or the equipment is more complicated to install, you're going to see a more number of issues associated to the quality to that component. So there's a mix of a specific equipment or components that can drive lower quality, if that makes sense. So yes, there's some correlation there. So it's not not having an effect. But yeah, in most cases, we're kind of really focused on workmanship.
Thank you. And then kind of taking a step back and looking at all the projects that have been inspected over time, can you identify if quality is improving or not over time?
I mean, based on our data set, it has not improved a lot. What we're seeing improve, meaning at the industry level, when it comes to companies that are actually caring about quality, you see a clear improvement. And this is companies we've been working with for several years, very clear improvement. I think the more we do work, kind of the wider number of projects and EPCs, we've been increasing our data set and kind of getting more points in the industry, and our results don't show yet that the industry is getting better. And I like to always make the point on how fast the industry is growing is a factor of that. That we are, I mean, if we're gonna quadruple the capacity in the next 10 years of solar, you have 3/4 of the people that are gonna be working in the industry are not in the industry yet. So there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of a lot of things we have to overcome, and therefore yes, we don't see that. I think it's getting better when you are working with them, but the industry is growing so much. There's so many newcomers that is kind of counterbalancing the overall industry quality.
Yeah, if I may, they're only going to, it's only going to get better if people care or if people are forced to care, right? So are we asking these questions? Are we having these sites inspected? And at some point business is going to run out if enough developers and asset owners understand, oh, we only want to work with people who are serious about quality.
And so, Mike, do you see quality as like a competitive advantage, something that you would hold close to the chest?
It comes up from time to time when we're talking about business development, but we get a lot of feedback from the field about how we do things, what our drawings look like, and we always want to hear ways that we could get better. I guess you could say it's a competitive advantage because the long-term financial health is going to be there. I would not say that that from a customer perspective, it comes up every day. It does come up, but it's not as often as we're having discussions with our installers.
Got it. Thank you. And then kind of, Mike, what do you do if someone, oh, sorry, Victor, are we out of time?
We're going to get played off here.
Yeah.
No, come on. I'm not going to stop you mid the question.
Got it. So what do you do if someone's not meeting your standards kind of halfway through the project and you can't turn things around? What's your approach?
Oh, you're asking me as the EPC developer? Yeah, I think you always want to start with the positive, right? You always want to start with, look, we found some issues. Let's pause here. Let's talk about them. You know, we're here to help, and see if you have improvement over the next few days or the next week. If you don't see it then it's a more serious conversation. Then it's more about, okay, can we even continue this project? You know, what is in your contract? Yeah, right. What can you actually enforce via the contract? Then it gets to a more serious place. So start by trying to coach and train and encourage, and then take the necessary steps after.
All right. Well, thank you, David and Mike, and thank you so much, Victor, for the opportunity to present to everyone today.
And thank you for a very informative webinar. Indeed, it's such a tough job choosing the right supplier. So yeah, thanks for pitching in with all that information, all those graphs, and we understand that you have shared a lot of maybe hidden, maybe less visible nuggets of wisdom. So really a huge thank you for that. And for our participants, if you're looking to find out even more nuggets of wisdom, on the 1st and 2nd of April 2026, we will be at Solarplaza Summit Asset Management North America. You can find more details by following the QR code on the screen. And because time is up, once again, thank you everybody for taking part, and thank you Tori, David, and Mike for contributing. And see you soon at the next webinar.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Bye.